there is a whole range of bilateral issues as well as multilateral issues, and perhaps we should take them one by one. Why don't we start with the bilateral issues? There are a number of platforms for structured dialogue with China that exist, more than half a dozen. Ambassador Surie, you have dealt with them. Many of those were started during your time and some possibly many years earlier. Could you throw some light on these dialogue platforms that exist, and how much have they been able to contribute to building up the bilateral relationship to where it is today?
Let me categorize them. You have the dialogue mechanisms led by the Foreign Office. You have those now led by the Planning Commission. You have those led by the Ministry of Commerce. You have those led by the Ministry of Finance. You have those led by the Ministry of Defense. The problem is that,
and you have the strategic dialogue at the level of the National Security Advisors.
Yeah, well, I was covering, including that in the Foreign Office part of it, because it's more both. So, because the backstopping is done by the Ministry of External Affairs, frankly. So, no, I think it's not enough to have dialogue mechanisms. It helps generate better understanding. It does not necessarily lead to concrete cooperation activities on the ground, we've noticed.
No, but it does provide...
it provides the forums, absolutely.
The forums.
I mean, you see, for instance, we had this unfortunate incident in Depsang, for instance. Now, we had the dialogue mechanisms in place.
Last year, in April,
we have the dialogue mechanisms in place to handle such situations. And it was handled through that dialogue mechanism and handled effectively. But that is not always the case. But the important thing is that these dialogues must convert into concrete cooperation activities, not just on a bilateral plane, but also on a regional and multilateral plane, because they also discuss regional and multilateral issues.
Absolutely.
They don't, especially the financial and the economic dialogues. So I think we also must have more regularity about these dialogues. For instance, the terrorism dialogue, as far as I am aware, doesn't happen too regularly.
So, are you saying that these dialogues are not, it is not fixed that they will take place once every year or once every 6 months or something like that? There are long gaps at times.
Yeah, there should be fixed periodicity for all these dialogues, but I don't think it happens. The new ones tend to happen. The old ones tend to sort of die down a bit. But the important thing is to sustain all of them in a sensible way, and so that there is no overlapping also. But one thing you have to bear in mind about the development of the India-China relationship, particularly in the 21st century, this century, a lot of it has been top-driven, and which means there is always necessarily a lag between the bottom and the middle catching up. And I think that process that has been happening in the case of many of these dialogue mechanisms.
When Ambassador Surie said that it is top-driven and we see these various dialogue platforms, one question that was often raised is the growing trade deficit between India and China. The trade between India and China has expanded enormously in recent years, currently stands at something like $70 billion, if I'm right. And the deficit to China's advantage is as high as $30 billion or nearly $30 billion. So, will this be one of the issues, and how much of this is a cause for concern? How do we address, in this trickle down from the high level initiatives that we take to build up the relationship, how do we address the concerns about the growing trade deficit? Professor Kondapalli, you have any views on this?
I think absolutely it's correct that we have a major concern on the growing trade deficit between the two countries. From 2007 till last year, it was about $167 billion of trade deficit overall, cumulatively we have had so far. This is massive. When we compare with, say, Japan-India trade deficit, it's about roughly $8 to $9 billion.
A year?
A year.
Yes, and this is about
China,
30 billion.
On an average, about $20 to $25 billion with China.
Right.
But the difference between Japan-India trade is that Japan invests in India heavily in the infrastructure projects, Delhi Metro and a host of other projects. But we haven't seen Chinese investment coming in as a counter to the trade deficit. For example, Chinese investment in India so far is about $469 million.
Which is very small.
In comparison to about $92 billion that Japan committed for the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. So the Japanese try to address the trade deficit through investments in India, while in the case of China, we have not seen any direct investments. Of course, project works have increased from China, about $52 billion of project investments, but these do not directly contribute to employment or direct benefits to the economy in India. So I think this is one, but the institutionalization between the ministries and different ministries is essential so that we address some of the emerging problems, including on trade deficit. For example, in the strategic and economic dialogue processes or in other fora, we have been insisting that the Chinese open up the market for the Indian pharmaceuticals and the software also products. There is also the suggestion that we need to export more to China, which means that we need to change towards the manufacturing sector as a major component of our GDP.